Okay. All right. Just a quick idea. I know I'm a couple weeks behind. I apologize. But I always like to start off with a vort from the Parsha. So Yosef forces the hand of Yaakov and the Shvatim. He wants them to send Binyamin down, which is more than just seeing his loving brother. According to the Ramban, the dreams were nevuah. So he wanted to fulfill the prophecy of seeing everyone bow down to him. So it was more than just a charade, according to the Ramban. It was a nevuah, which you can't play around with as a navi. So he forces the hand, he gets Binyamin to come down. Yaakov sends the brothers. He sends them down with Zimras Haaretz, literally the best of the land, to, we imagine, soften up Yosef. The Torah spends 3 psukim discussing what Yaakov told them to give Yosef, and finally, in Pasuk Yidalid, Perak Mem Gimel, Pasuk Yidalid, he says, "V'kel shakai Hashem yitain lachem rachamim," should give you mercy. Says Rashi, "Me'ata einchem chasirim klum." Now you lack nothing. Ela tefilah. I just always thought there was a beautiful phrase. Me'ata einchem chasirim klum. You're now lacking nothing. Ela tefilah. The only thing you lack right now is tefilah. As if to say, before we do anything in life, whether as crucial and life-threatening as this, or anything, Rashi tells us, Me'ata inchem chasirim klum ela tefilah. You have to do your shtadlus. You have to do your due diligence. You have to seek medical help, and obviously we believe that in Judaism very strongly. In fact, it's an avera not to. But at the end of the day, once you've taken all your precautions, all your preparations, Me'ata inchem chasirim klum ela tefilah. The only thing left at that point is tefilah. That's taught to us by Rashi and a couple weeks ago's parsha. Okay, so we got up to Baruch Shemar. I think we started Baruch Shemar, but it's okay. We'll start from Baruch Shemar. So as Susan mentioned before, we have this idea of Pesukei Zimra. We won't spend as much time on Pesukei Zimra, I don't think, as we will on Shachris, but that's fine. Pesukei Zimra, of course, as we said, starts with Baruch Shemar. We mentioned at the end that of last week, or 2 weeks ago at this point, maybe even 3 weeks. Yeah, that Baruch Shemar is the beginning bracha, Yishtabach is the end. So we're going to bookmark Pesukei Zimra with Baruch Shemar and Yishtabach. Okay, so the bracha preceding Pesukei Zimra, or introducing if you prefer, is Baruch Shemar. The Rif, one of the Rishonim, earlier commentators, says Baruch Shemar was written by the rabbis. We imagine whenever one of the Rishonim say that, they mean the rabbis from the Gemara. It's a pretty safe bet. The Mishnah Berurah says Shvach Zeh Tiknu Anshe Knesset Hagadola, that many others believe, like the Mishnah Berurah, they ascribe Baruch Shemar to the Anshe Knesset Hagadola, the men of the Great Assembly, who lived well after the rabbis in the Gemara. They're the ones who instituted the Shemona Esrei for us. Before I should say, excuse me. Again, the Mesorah of Torah Sheba'al Peh, the oral law, goes from Moshe to Yoshua to the Zekanim, the elders, Zekanim to the Nevi'im, the prophets, Nevi'im to the Anshe Knesset Hagadolah. So it's well before the time of the Gemara at that point. Okay, so the Mishnah Berurah says that's, and many agree with that, the Baruch Shemar was, like Shemona Esrei, was instituted by the Anshe Knesset Hagadolah. How did they come to write Baruch Shemar? Legend has it, if you will, the Mishnah Berurah quotes the Or Zarua, who says a note fell down from Shemayim with 87 words on it. We know that most of Tefilah, most of davening, especially the Yamin Orayim, it was written Beruach HaKodesh when it was instituted. It was written at some point without, it wasn't just made up by a poet on, in the middle of Sfat, which is fine too. But, that's not the way our Tefilah was written. It was written Beruach HaKodesh. It was, there was some sort of divine hand in the writing of the Tefilah. So this isn't that far-fetched of a tale. It's not that crazy if you think about it. It's not that much different than Ruach HaKodesh. So a little note fell down from Shemayim with 87 words on it, which is alluded to in the Pasuk in Shir Hashirim that says, Rosho Kesem Puz. Literally, Rosho, his head, is as Kesem Puz, like the most fine gold. Why? What is that? Kesem Puz. Puz is gold. But what is I think Kesem Puz goes together like that. Kesem can also mean Tamim, is a stain. But interestingly enough, but in this context, so the Kesem Puz is the finest of the best of the best, I guess you'd say. So what does that have to do with anything? Well, the Gematria, very good. Gematria Paz. Paz is 87. So 87 words in Baruch Shemar. Rosho refers, what's Rosho then? Rosh Hashanah is the beginning of the year. Rosho, the beginning of Sukkot Zimra, is Paz. It's 87 words. So that's the, I was always taught this as a kid, and I said, that's cute. It's a, crazy story. That's like a tale, So the Mishnah Berurah quotes, it's the Or Zarua, one of the earlier commentators. But, if you look at all of our, majority of our liturgy, it came down from crazier things than this. So I don't think this is that far-fetched of a story by any stretch of the imagination. Is this any different than God coming to a prophet and saying, here's what you should write in the Siddur for the next thousands of years? I don't think so. So it helps us appreciate, hopefully, Baruch Shamar, if nothing else. Okay, that's Baruch Shamar. So now we know it's Paz. Gematria Paz, 87. Now you know there are 87 words in Baruch Shamar. Not that long of a tefilah, as we know. Okay, after Baruch Shamar, if you're Ashkenazi, you say Hodu. Hodu, that's what Ashkenazim say this. Sfardim say Hodu before Baruch Shamar. We say it after. Sfardim do this because they want it to connect to the section dealing with the Karbanos. We spoke about it a little bit a few weeks ago. But they wanted to connect to the section with the Karbanos because they wanted it as a transition to Pzukah Zimra. They wanted to go Karbanos, then they want Hodu, kind of connected to Karbanos a little bit, and then they want to go into Pzukah Zimra with Baruch Shamar, and then eventually Ashrei Shtabach, as we'll see, and others in between. But we leave it after Baruch Shamar. We also say Karbanos, but some are more meticulous than others. It's definitely the part of Shachris, if you've ever been to a Shachris minyan during the week especially, that's, kind of skipped over. Doesn't get enough credit, if you'll let me say that. It's unfortunate. It's an important part because the Gemara tells us that whoever says the Parsha of Karbanos without a Beis HaMikdash, it's as if we brought the Karbanos in the Beis HaMikdash. So if you say the Korban Toda, it's as if you brought the Korban Toda. So it's unfortunate, but it's life. It's just another thing. Davening's long. We acknowledge that. So yes. Okay. Hodu simply is verses, is psukim from Tehillim. And it's Tehillim and Divrei Yamim, but what do they have to do with each other? They're both composed by David HaMelech. So not that David HaMelech wrote Divrei Yamim, but parts of Divrei Yamim and, of course, Tehillim, which was written by David HaMelech. So it's all composed by David HaMelech. So that's the connection. That's the Tzad HaShava, the common denominator of Hodu. They were recited daily. These psukim that we say is Hodu L'Hashem Ki Tov, right? I don't know if you're familiar with this part of davening, but these were recited daily after David HaMelech brought the Aron, right? He brought the Aron with the Sefer Torah to Yerushalayim. This was before the Beis HaMikdash was built, because of course David HaMelech never saw the Beis HaMikdash being built. He planted the seeds, but of course it had to go to his son Shlomo, who eventually built the Beis HaMikdash. So this is before the Beis HaMikdash was being built, but as they were getting ready, so David HaMelech brings the Aron to Yerushalayim, and they said these phrases that we call Hodu. This is, again, Divrei Yamim, Hodu L'Hashem Kiru Bishmo, Hodu Ba'amim Ali L'Osav, right? Should sound somewhat familiar. It's in the middle of Baruch Shamar and Ashrei for those who are not familiar with it. Okay. Next. So that's Hodu. Now we're up to Mizmor L'Soda, before we get to Ashrei, one of my favorites. Okay. Ashrei, Mizmor L'Soda. So literally, Mizmor L'Soda means Psalm of Thanksgiving, right? Mizmor is like a psalm of L'Soda, Thanksgiving, giving Todah. We know it's the modern Hebrew word for thanks is Todah. So the Sharei Tshuva in Or Chaim says this is another place. Remember we mentioned before we're supposed to stand for Baruch Shamar. You're supposed to sit originally for the entire davening until the Chazan started Shtabach. Then they said, well, you should really stand for Baruch Shamar, beginning bracha of Pzukah Zimra. So now we're going to add in another place that you stand. That's Mizmor L'Soda. Mizmor L'Soda, we'll get to another place. There will be another exception to that rule. There's another place we stand on Pzukah Zimra. But before that, at least for right now, we stand for Mizmor L'Soda. Why? Anyone know why we stand for Mizmor L'Soda? It says to stand, that's why. Don't say because Art School says so. If I teach you anything in our time together, never say because Art School says so. Art School's not the posek. They're great. Oh, they're wonderful. I love Art School. They make our lives much easier. But we have to use our minds and hearts to understand and appreciate what we're doing in life, especially when it comes to tefilah. So the reason we stand for Mizmor L'Soda, it's a rule. Any tefilah that's connected to a korban, we stand for a very simple reason. They stood while bringing the korbanos. So any time that there's any tefilah, now we'll start to think about different tefillos that will come up during the course of our week. Some on Shabbos, some on the weekday. If it's connected to a korban, you stand to remember the idea that they stood when bringing the korban. Now, of course, we know, but you don't have to stand. It's not, if someone can't stand. I did not stand for Mizmor. I've not stood for Mizmor Soda this week. I could. Amanda was trying to urge me on to stand for Kaddish, and I was trying to explain to her. We had a nice dialogue yesterday, and I was like, it's fine. I'll get the next Kaddish, but it's Kaddish. You have to stand. She grew up a different way than I did, but nonetheless, this Mizmor Soda, it's a nice idea to stand. Personally, it's sitting, standing might be difficult for others, but so obviously you don't have to. But it's a nice idea to stand because we remember the way the Beis Hamikdash, the korban was brought in the Beis Hamikdash, which was done be'amida, which was done standing. That's why, for example, we stand when counting Sfiras HaOmer. For those who, let's say, don't daven Mariv generally, but they count Sfira with a bracha. So we'll get to that a little later on in the year. So for those who count Sfira with a bracha, it should be said standing. Not just because it's a bracha, and brachas should ideally be said standing for the most part, except for maybe Shema, if you could. It usually gives you more kavana. But no, on a simple level, because the Sfiras HaOmer is reminding us of the Korban HaOmer, and a korban was brought bi'amida, standing. So it's the same idea. So even if you say Shema at night, or whatever you do for Mariv, or you're just sitting and you want to say Sfiras HaOmer, so you should stand for Sfiras HaOmer. It's a nice idea. But again, if you can't, or it's, you don't say it again. It's not imperative, it's just a nice idea, because any tefilah that's b'makom korban, that's instead of korban, or reminding us of a korban, we do bi'amida. We do vis-a-vis while standing. So the Kohanim, of course, stood for the entire avodah. Interestingly enough, I get asked that a lot. How often, because now people want to know about me, about standing. So the real idea, well, let's leave it at that. I'm not going to go through each part of that. We'll go through each part of davening individually as they come up. But I will say this, very important to understand, when the Sefer Torah, when the Aron is opened, there's no chiyuv to stand. Let's leave it at that. That's a very important understanding, especially we'll get to by Yom Kippur. But very important to understand. It's a nice idea. It's always a nice idea to stand when something holy happens, when something good happens. Fine. When a great rabbi or rebbitzin walks in the room, fine. I understand that. If a great man or woman walks in the room, so fine. But this is very different. When the Aron is open, there's not really the chiyuv. It's when the Sefer Torah is taken out of the Aron, and you're following the Sefer Torah, so to speak. If you're more than 4 cubits away, then there's this idea to stand if you can. That's why I tell people by Ne'ilah. Right? By Ne'ilah, it's nice to stand because the Aron's open generally. The shul's minhag, like many shuls. The Aron's open the whole Ne'ilah. Doesn't mean that we have to stand. If you can, great. But you don't have to. You really only, quote unquote, have to stand when the Sefer Torah is removed from the Aron. Okay, and even then, if you can't, it's not the end of the world. Obviously, if there's a significant reason. Okay.
People really took that on, though. People have taken that on to stand.
It's beautiful. If it gives you kavana.
It's interesting. I really thought it was
If it gives you kavana, if it helps you, it doesn't always help me. One year the room was spinning, so I said I want to encourage everyone to sit down if they need to. There's no halachic requirement to stand during Ne'ilah, and if when the room stops spinning, I will also stand as well. So I got a laugh out of that. I don't know if it was the right time to make a joke, but yeah. I mean, it's a nice idea. Don't get me wrong. If you can, and it does, there's no. You should. It's a nice idea to stand. It's like you're being machmir, but. Right, you should be let's put it this way: push yourself to do it when the Torah is removed. If you want to do it anytime the Aron's open, great. They used to happen in yeshiva where they have the Sefer Torah at the front, and they'd have to remove a Torah, or they'd have to move around, get ready for mincha or whatever. So the gabayim would come. So there's 400 people there. Everyone's got to stand, stop learning. So it's an interesting discussion about that. But great question. Yes.
Yeah. I wasn't so sure if I heard this correctly. Going back to it, but the ark isn't open, and some people still stand for Hodu.
Yeah.
Some people sit for Hodu. So I don't understand why the standing for Hodu.
Yeah, it's the 26 names of Hashem. Hodu Hashem Kitov. It's by Shabbos. It's generally. Our scroll says to stand. So there you have it. But it's interesting. It's not as imperative, but if you can stand, great. It's Hashem's name, but there are a lot of parts of Hashem's name you're supposed to stay sitting down also. So that's not the main reason. But it's an interesting part of tefillah that some stand, some don't. your own personal minhag. Everything's fine. Many people stand, but there's nothing to do with the Aron or the Korbanos in that part. Different aspect. Like Baruch Shamar also has nothing to do with Korbanos and nothing to do with.
Right.
But okay, interesting thought nonetheless. Okay, so what is Mizmor L'Soda? Very important. This is one of our themes together that we've been discussing. It's one of our. It's when we thank Kadosh Baruch Hu for all of the personal miracles. So it's not just salvation. I mean, it's not just Kriyas Yamsuf. That happens not often, as we know. This is personal miracles that happen to us on an individual basis. So in the time of the Beis Hamikdash, they would offer a Thanksgiving offering, a Thanksgiving sacrifice, a Korban Todah, for a personal miracle, or really any time someone was delivered from danger. So today we've replaced that with Hagomel, right, of Chaim. That's the mnemonic, the way to remember it. Right, Chavish, someone who was released from jail; Yam, someone who traveled overseas; Yisurin, someone who suffered affliction and was healed; and Mem Midbar, someone who went over the desert, traveled through the desert, and said that. So that's when Hagomel would come into play. Similarly to when one would bring the Korban Todah when they survived a personal danger, like one of those four we just mentioned. The discussion today is how far do we extend that. The most classic, most often discussed is whether traveling overseas qualifies as going to Israel and back over one of the main oceans. We'll leave it at that. It's definitely, in my personal opinion, it's more dangerous driving on Main Street, as we know, than it is in today's day and age than flying to Israel. But you have more of a chance to be struck by lightning. But whatever, that's a different time. There's definitely what to rely on based off the Shulchan Aruch's understanding of saying Hagomel for any overseas travel. Over the major seas, major oceanic travel. There's definitely what to rely on. So that should be based off your personal minhag. But so that's what the Korban Todah was brought, being saved from personal danger. It wasn't just brought as a community offering for Hashem splitting the sea. So any sort of danger Hashem saved you from, near car accident, whatever it was, or car accident, you walked out okay, Baruch Hashem, or whatever it would have been. Any personal miracle or any time someone was delivered from danger. That's when the Korban Todah was brought. You can imagine that the Korban Todah was brought. It was a very special Korban. I mean, think about, I knew a family, probably some people know here, in Queens, not in Kew Garden Hills. She would offer, she made a Kiddush every single week in the summer. Every week, because something happened to one of her children as a very young boy, and a miracle, he was saved. Baruch Hashem, he now has children of his own. And every that was her way of what she felt connected to, for whatever reason. That's what she just liked, having a Kiddush every Shabbos. So she needed to do that. She felt like that was important to her. So no one has any. Everyone can understand where this woman's coming from, right? If HaKadosh Baruch Hu saves, miraculously saves you, or one of your family members, whatever it may be, it's almost like you can. The Korban Todah was an easy one to get. The Korban Chatas was a hard one to do because you had to admit you were wrong and you sinned. Chatas is sin, right? Korban Asham is a guilt offering, and exactly, Korban. Then sometimes you're not even sure if you did sin. You have to bring a certain type of korban. So the other korbanos were kind of complicated. The Korban Todah was, pretty simple. Hashem saved my entire family from disaster. I'm going to thank God. I'm going to bring a Suda. I'm going to have a Suda. No one really argued with that ever, I think, in the history of the world. Everyone understood that. So the Korban Todah is one that I think we can appreciate. So hopefully the Mizmor L'Soda that we say can be as well. Yes?
Why do we have so much discussion about a woman who mentioned going? She should.
Yeah.
You're saying it's just dangerous for her.
Yeah. No, I don't have any issue with a woman benching Gomel. It's just that it's the same. The concept, the discussion is whether or not a man can bench for a woman, just like a man can make Kiddush for a woman. Right, so if you believe a man could make Kiddush and Havdalah for a woman, so I don't think there's so crazy. It's also brachos, so I don't think it's so crazy for a man to make a gomel. But if that's not the situation, or the woman prefers to make it on her own, there's nothing wrong with that. The minhag of the shul seems to be where they do it after davening, which I think most shul, but you should have a minyan. So we get 10 men together. We had a woman a month ago who needed this. Yeah, so No, the minhag of this shul, which is most shuls, I think. I shouldn't say most. A lot of shuls do this. It's after davening, a woman will come up. At least that's what happened to me so far. But I've only been here 4 months. So.
I remember women doing it.
It could be. Rabbi Yoel thought this is the way his father wanted it done, but it could be. There also could have been a special circumstance, and I also imagine if there was a situation where everyone knew certain situations in the shul in the 70s and 80s or whatever, maybe that might have been different. Where they said, come on, everyone knows. That might have been a different situation. I wonder, but yes. Again, so there's so many different ways of looking at it within that.
It's not a chiyuv then.
No. I mean, today Hagomel is only. It's like any bracha. It's so often debated as it is. Aside from the man-woman aspect, it's so often debated when you make Hagomel in the first place. People. Yeah, I mean childbirth, and I mean I personally don't make it after traveling for Israel. I personally did Amanda make it after? I don't remember. It's been so long. I think we do after our childbirth. But again, my concept, my discussion on Hagomel is the Mishnah Berurah's understanding, where the Mishnah Berurah writes 1 in 1,000 women died in childbirth. That's why we make Hagomel for childbirth. Baruch Hashem, that's not true. That's not true. And I'm not even close. Bli ayin hara. I remember giving a shiur on Hagomel once, and there was one of the big OBGYNs, Dr. Schiller, a very sweet woman in Baltimore, was there. And I asked her, I said, look at the Mishnah Berurah, you tell me. She's like, oh my God, thank God, no. I was like, I was surprised. I thought, in my head, I was also like a 22-year-old, father of one at the time. And I thought maybe it's not far off. I mean, maybe it's a little, she's like, oh my God, no, 1 in 1,000. That's like, we're like one in, we're in the tens and tens of thousand, Kanai Nahara, close to like 100,000. Like it's very rare for a woman to either pass or suffer some sort of terrible situation as a result. So, Baruch Hashem, Bli ayin hara. But again, that's just room for the debate, is understanding, because you could see it's just times have changed. I'm sure air travel was different when it 80 years ago, 90 years ago. But nonetheless, okay, let's maybe we should.
So why don't we say those Erev Pesach?
That's good. The next one. Why we don't say it. Then we'll talk about what we don't say. So maybe we'll stop here and then focus on when we don't say it next week. One of them being Erev Pesach. It's very interesting because it's not usually the way we have things in our tefilah. It's connected to tachanun. When we don't say tachanun, we don't say this. We don't. But this is different. Mizmor Soda is totally different. Erev Pesach. No, but it's a very good guess. I don't want to give it away.
Okay.
I like to leave my, leave it in suspense. Yeah. Okay, so I assume